자, 그럼 글로벌 인재 포럼 2020 둘째 날 시작하겠습니다. 함께 해주신 여러분 대단히 환영합니다. 먼저 인사드리겠습니다. 저는 어제 이어서 오늘도 인사드리겠습니다. 아나운서 장선영입니다. 반갑습니다. 네, 고맙습니다. 글로벌 인재 포럼 2020 어제부터 또 여러분과 함께 하고 있는데요. 이 AI와 인간의 공존 시대를 위해서 다양한 논의들 이루고 있습니다. 정말 뜨거운 열기와 또 많은 관심으로 함께 해 주셔서 너무나 감사합니다. 오늘 역시 그 열기를 이어가 보도록 하겠습니다. 마지막까지 깊은 열정과 또 애정 보내주시길 바라며 올해는 조금 특별하게 하이브리드 형태로 행사를 진행하고 있습니다. 오프라인뿐만 아니라 온라인으로도 여러분 함께하고 계신데요. 각지에서 온라인으로 함께하시는 분들께도 깊은 감사의 인사 드리겠습니다. 의미 있는 시간 되시길 바랍니다. 자, 그럼 지금부터 글로벌 인재 포럼 2020 트랙 B 첫 번째 세션 빅데이터 인사 관리의 미래에 대해서 함께 논의해 보도록 하겠습니다. 최근 각 산업 발전에서 빼놓을 수 없는 것이 바로 빅데이터일 건데요. 이 HR 분야도 역시 그렇습니다. 어마어마하게 많은 자료들 관리하고 또 분석하면서 기업의 인재를 채용하고 또 조직 간의 구성원들을 관리하기 위해서 인공지능을 도입하고 있죠. 뿐만 아니라 조직의 구성원 간 그리고 부서 간의 관계를 분석하기 위한 노력들도 역시 인공지능으로 계속하고 있습니다. 효율적인 인사 관리를 위해서 첨단 기술들을 적용하고 있는데요. 이번 세션에서는 관련한 다양한 사례들 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 인사 관리의 변화 트렌드 역시 짚어보도록 하죠. 자, 세션의 발표는 노시어 컨트랙터 미국 노스웨스턴대 행동과학과 교수님 그리고 양승준 허트카운트 대표님 헤더 화이트먼 퓨처워크플레이스 펠로님 은진기 리박스 컨설팅 인사전략사업본부 상무님께서 함께해 주시겠고요. 진행으로는 좌장으로 이재진 영국 리즈대 HR 애널리틱스 연구원님께서 함께해 주시겠습니다. 단상에 나와 계신데요. 여러분 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다. 네, 진행 부탁드리겠습니다.
Hello, welcome to the first Track B session on the topic of big data and the future of work, future of human resources management. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much for your participation and interest to those who are sitting here and the rest of you who are participating in real time online, despite the troubled time we find ourselves in due to COVID-19. My name is Lee Jae-jin, an HR analytics researcher at the University of Leeds in the UK. It is my great honor to lead this session as a moderator with eminent experts in this field. On the panel today, we have 4 respected professionals in the field of data science and digital HR. Let me introduce each of the presenters. First, we have Professor Noshio Contractor of Behavioral Sciences at Northwestern University. Second, the CEO of HeartCount, Yang Seung-jun. Third, Future Workplace Fellow, Dr. Heather Whiteman. And last but not least, the HR Strategy Partner at Reeboks Consulting, Eun-jin Gi. In this session, each of the panelists will present for 15 minutes respectively. Following on from this, we are going to have a Q&A session with the audience for approximately 25 minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment through your mobile application system. As you may know, this session has a hybrid format, that is, audience participation will be both online and in person. In addition to this, 2 of the presenters today are joining us remotely. Therefore, we'd ask for your understanding in advance if any network issues occur during the presentation. As I mentioned earlier, the theme of this session is big data and the future of human resources management. With the emergence of big data and advanced analytical techniques, interest in HR analytics, also known as people analytics, is dramatically increasing throughout the world. More and more organizations adopt an evidence-based, data-driven approach to the decision-making process in HR functions, including but not limited to talent acquisition, training, performance management, and employee engagement. In particular, in this session, we delve into these aspects using practical business case studies, as well as drawing a blueprint of HR in the future from the perspective of data analytics. Now, shall we start in earnest by introducing the first presenter? Noshio Contractor is the Jane S. and William J. White Professor of Behavioral Sciences at Northwestern University. He has for decades published a wide range of books and articles in the field of social communication networks. A world-famous scholar in his field, he is also the director of the Science of Networks in Communities Research Center. Today, he is going to present on the topic of people analytics, using digital exhaust from the web to leverage network insights in the workplace. Digital exhaust is a term that may sound unfamiliar to some of us. Let me explain this in Korean for a second. 여기서 디지털 exhaust라는 개념은 우리가 인터넷이나 온라인상에서 뭔가 활동할 때 남는 디지털 흔적을 의미합니다. 예를 들어서 우리가 구글이나 네이버에서 뭔가 검색하거나 클릭했을 때 남는 기록들이 여기에 해당됩니다. Okay, then, please give a warm welcome to Professor Contractor.
Thank you very much again, and I'm delighted to be a part of this wonderful event. I am very, very sorry that I was not able to be there in person. It was indeed something I had been looking forward to for a long time, and I hope that there will be future opportunities to visit your wonderful country. I should say revisit your wonderful country, since I have been there before. As was mentioned by Jin Lee, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of our experiences in people analytics, and I want to first start by acknowledging that there are a lot of collaborators that I have on the work that I'm going to be reporting on today, and I've listed them on the left. They are from Northwestern, but also from Fudan University in Shanghai, at Harvard Business Schools, University of California, Santa Barbara, and the University of Washington. So what I want to talk about today is indeed people analytics, and part of it was motivated by an article that my collaborator Paul Leonardi and I published in Harvard Business Review in December of 2018. And the title of that article was Better People Analytics, and the focus was measure who they know, not just who they are. And this is an important point that I want to make, because what we are basically saying is that while a lot of people analytics is focused on individual characteristics of the people, we believe that there is a lot to be gained by also looking and including in people analytics the relationships that exist between people. So if you think about the digital exhaust that Jin Lee was just talking about, if you think of an employee, they are leaving messages for other people, they're leaving email, sometimes they're leaving badges, sometimes they leave likes, sometimes they send text messages, and so on and so forth. And so we are increasingly leaving a lot of our digital trace data through electronic means, etc. The main purpose of the article was to say that when you look at these kinds of traces that we leave, we can look at them to see if there are certain structural signatures that can be seen in that data set. What do we mean by these structural signatures? By structural signatures, we mean, are there certain patterns of interactions that people have with other people? Because these structural signatures, these patterns tell us something very insightful and important about what people can do and can't do. For example, this is a summary of the article that we wrote, where we said if you see a single individual who is connected to other individuals who are not connected to each other, as you see on the left, we call this the ideation signature, which means that the person in purple is very capable of coming up with new ideas, more so than somebody who is inside a network of people where everyone is connected to one another. The second signature we call is the influence signature. This is a signature where it's not just that you're connected to a lot of people, but perhaps you're connected to people who are in turn connected to a lot of people, who are in turn connected to a lot of people. We actually use the same signature, is used by Google as part of the PageRank algorithm that decides which of the pages are ranked at the top of your search results. And that is based on the influence signature. These two are the individual level. At the team level, we have a signature called the efficiency signature. The efficiency signature says that a team where people are connected to each other well, where they send a lot of messages, they are likely to be efficient, which means that this is a team that will get its work done on time. But that doesn't mean that they will do a great job. If you want the team to do a great job or be innovative, then we have to look at the team's innovation signature. And the team's innovation signature will tell you that the team talks to a lot of different people on the outside. It has high range on the outside, and that a team is likely to be innovative if they talk to different people on the outside, as you see out here, these people are doing. And then finally, the organizational level, we can think of a signature that tells us to what extent is the organization siloed. That is, to what extent is each department only connecting within their own sections and not connecting between sections. Finally, we have at the organizational level another signature that is called the vulnerability signature. The vulnerability signature tells you if there is someone outside your organization who's talking to many people inside your organization who are not talking to each other, which means that you then that the organization becomes vulnerable to this person on the outside who is getting key pieces of information from many parts of your organization, but you within the organization are not connecting these pieces. So if we have this wonderful signatures based on decades of research, and this is just a few of them, the question is, why aren't we using this much more right now within organizations? And we think that part of the answer is that if in the past we have done this using surveys, survey data is time consuming, you get low response rates, and they get out of date very quickly. So what if we were to say that we could have survey data at minimal cost with 100% response rate updated 24/7? Well, that's exactly what we can do now because of digital trace data. So if you think of the different techniques and technologies that we are using, we are able to do a lot of this kind of work. So right after the article that we published, the article in Harvard Business Review, Paul Leonardi and myself and a team of others began a series of studies where we wanted to see if we could take digital trace data and use it to predict what somebody would have said on a survey using machine learning or AI techniques. So we started this study with 5 companies in the US and in China. And our original question was, can we predict survey network responses using digital trace data? The good news is we can. We've done a great job of being able to predict it, which means that in the future, we will not necessarily need to collect survey data. We can simply take digital trace data and predict what people would have said on a survey. But very soon after we were celebrating that success, something else happened. We had COVID-19. And as we had COVID-19, we realized that we were actually on the brink of a brand new experiment. And we now had an opportunity to do something which we would normally never have had a chance to do, which is a worldwide experiment in virtual teaming. And so we asked ourselves a second question: how does work networks change from before to during COVID-19? And I'm going to take an opportunity today to talk with you a little bit about some of what we have found on that particular front. The data I'm going to talk about comes from a multinational industrial manufacturing company that is headquartered in the West, but this particular branch office is in China. We collected data from 3 departments, 185 employees in 34 offices in 16 cities that included 18 teams across and within and across cities within China. The data we collected goes back to digital trace data that started in October 2019. We also collected survey data at the same time. And then we also continue to collect digital trace data that I'm going to report to you up until March of 2020. The data that we collected was from a platform very similar to the one we are using right now, WebEx. It was not WebEx, but very similar to that. And as I said, we also collected survey data in December before the COVID data. We also had HR data from the company. So if you think about what happened in China, there were phases that on 11th of January was when awareness of COVID hit. By the 4th of February, employees were leaving the office. This, of course, extended the Chinese New Year, and they began to come back to their offices on the 17th of February, based on a phased return. We in the US are very envious that China was able to go back while we are still stuck at home. And certainly we are envious and very happy that even many of you in South Korea have been able to go back to normalcy a lot sooner than we have or may in the future. So this was the phases we talked about. We had the phase that was normal working, when the crisis was looming, when we shifted to remote, and then the phased return. And so we call the old the normal, that when we shifted to the remote, we call it the new normal. And as the phased return is there, we call it the next normal. So if you look at it, this is where the awareness happened. This is where the deaths happened. This is where people began to come back into office, the recoveries, et cetera. And you could see that there's a clear timeline associated with these issues here. So we were able to get communication networks data by looking at who met with whom using the equivalent of the WebEx technology that we're using here. And we focused on smaller meetings where there were only less than 7 people. If there was a company-wide Zoom session, that we did not consider that as a real meeting because people were not really having a conversation with each other. In this particular case, 93% of the meetings had 7 or fewer participants, and those are the network links that I'm going to talk about here today. So this is what that network looked like before. On a particular day afterwards, on the 15th of Jan, the network looked like this. Then when we moved further on the 14th of February, this is what the network looked like. And then finally, this was the network that was collected on the 21st of February after the phased return, etc. What did we find? We found that on average, the purple line out here, the daily meetings began to fall slightly when they went into crisis looming. The number of meetings fell slightly, but then they went up, and meetings have now increased dramatically, 53% during the phased return. There was a lot more variability on day-to-day basis of how many meetings there was. Now that variability has come down. There are not many days with fewer meetings. Even the lowest number of meetings before COVID was 77 on a particular day. Now the lowest number of meetings on a particular day are 218, which tells you how much more meetings we are doing now. Then we also looked at the size of meetings, the number of people. And as COVID began to go up, we see that the average number of people who were at a particular meeting went up. And again, after we came back, the number of meetings came down to just under 5 people. But there are now some meetings that go to all the way up to 10 people, etc. Now we talk about the duration of the meetings. The duration of the meetings pre-COVID, on average, was 21. They went up during the crisis. They went up to 30 minutes on average during the shift to remote. And now they're beginning to stabilize, but they haven't really come back to the old normal. So the next normal is still pretty high in this case. We also wanted to see what patterns of connections within and between teams do we observe. And we saw, for example, that the number of new ties that were being formed, the number of people who are connecting has gone down during the crisis, but has gone up dramatically. So you're talking to a lot of new people and et cetera now than you were talking pre-COVID or even during COVID, et cetera. So in the old days, there were 63 pairs of people teaming up in a day. Today, there are 98 pairs of people who are teaming up in a day. We also wanted to end with a couple of other focus questions. Before COVID, the majority of the meetings that you had were in fact focusing outside. So you had people in your own team, but quite a few of your meetings that you had were with people outside your team. There was an external focus. It is interesting that as the crisis began, your teams began to focus internally. More and more of your conversations were with people inside your team. In English, we have a phrase called circling the wagon. That is, when you are in crisis, you come close into the family and you get close to the ones that are in your team. Now we see that during the shift to remote, while people were in remote, they were only almost talking internally focused. But now that they are back again to phased return, we are seeing some semblance of going back to both internal and a little bit of external, but it's still a lot less. So the crisis was focusing inwards, and now we're beginning to see some phased return. So as you can see, before COVID, external focus, during COVID, internal focus, phased return, you're seeing a balance between the external and the internal focus. Now we also asked ourselves, how much of your connections were with people in your own office? We find that in the geographical office that you were located. Before COVID, only a third of the meetings were with people in the same office. During COVID and during the shift to remote, it went up to 60% of your meetings were only with people in your own office. And again, that stayed pretty high even after that you still say is pretty high. So what is telling us is that even though technologies that we are using allow us to talk to people anywhere, we are using the technology more and more in this crisis to talk to people within our own office, even after our phased return back to the office, et cetera. We also wanted to see, do team networks broaden or deepen during a time of this? And we find that before COVID, 2/3 of those online meetings are those with whom you don't interact with in person. So remember, we asked them in a survey, who have you interacted with in person? Data we collected in December. And we found that before COVID, people used technology to broaden their networks. They were talking to people who they did not talk to in person. But that changed. Today, when we see what the networks are, who they're talking with, they're talking more and more to people who they were talking to in person rather than to new people. So they are deepening their networks rather than broadening their networks. We are taking a lot of these ideas now to create dashboards to help companies come up with new ideas of how they can come up with new teams, etc. So even though this idea of creating a dashboard to allow people to be able to see what their teams look like is a dream for us that we really believe is entirely possible. And that is, we are working now with NASA, for example, to help them come together with the next team that is going to go to, as part of the Artemis mission, that is going to take the first woman and the next man. This is the symbol of the Artemis mission, and it's going to be this mission that takes the next woman and the first man, and the first woman and the next man back to the moon in 2024. And we are working with them very closely to see how we could use these approaches. So we've created, for example, a dashboard for NASA that we are working with. And in that dashboard, what we are doing is we're able to log in there and we're able to say, okay, before launch, how do you want to understand people? So you can take different people and put them into a mission, just like we would do in a company when we want to create a team, etc. We could say, here is the activities that they want to work with. And then we can play with what scenarios they want. And as you can see out here, this tells you that on month one of the mission, who's going to get along with whom, who's going to like working with who's going to be more cohesive, who's going to dislike whom, etc. And so we are seeing how we are able to use the digital trace data to start making predictions in the future of who's going to interact with whom. NASA is always very proud of the fact that it makes inventions for space that have benefits back on Earth. And we hope that this is an example of one of those approaches where we can come back to Earth based on benefits that we're getting from space. So I will stop with that and hand things back to others. Thank you again very much for this opportunity. And again, I look forward to being able to field questions, etc., from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Contractor. It was a considerably interesting approach using social network analysis you carried out. In particular, from your presentation, we were able to look at what was before COVID-19 and what is during and what is after using network analysis. Our next speaker is the CEO of HeartCount, Yang Seung-jun. At HeartCount, he has been working for a decade on HR to create people analytics products that help corporations find useful patterns and insights from their own data. He also started to work in HR analytics even before this term is widely used and known in Korea. Furthermore, he has built a highly impressive career in the field of IT at various companies such as Samsung SDS, Yahoo, UBS, and Citigroup. Today, he is going to speak on the topic of In Korean, HR 현업이 데이터 활용에 주체가 되는 법. 이 주제로 양승준 대표님께서 발표해 주시겠습니다. 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
안녕하십니까. 오늘 HR 현업이 데이터 분석 또는 활용의 주체가 되는 법이라는 강연을 맡게 된 하트카운트의 양승준이라고 합니다. 일단 기업의 입장에서 피플은 두 가지 측면이 있는 것 같아요. 하나는 마케팅 세일즈 사람들이 보는 소비하는 사람에 있어서의 사람들인데, 여기에서 중요한 것은 우리가 구매력 있는 사람을 발굴해서 더 많이 자주 구매하도록 어떤 행동을 유발하는 것들이 중요하겠다면, HR 관점에서는 이제 일하는 사람인데 재능 있는 사람을 발굴 또는 육성해서 열심히 그리고 동료들과 사이좋게 잘 일하는 것이 중요할 것 같아요. 그래서 이제 피플 애널리틱에서 바라보는 피플은 일하는 사람인데 둘 간의 차이는 어떤 것이 있을까요? 일단 마케팅 세일즈 관점에서의 바라보는 소비하는 사람은 우리가 개선하려고 하는 KPI가 양적인 차이예요. 예를 들면 매출액, 전환율, 취소율 같이 숫자로 딱딱 떨어지는 숫자라면, HR에서 관심을 갖고 있는 매트릭은 성과, 만족도, 인게이지먼트, 이렇게 좀 질적인 차이에 집중해야 된다는 좀 어려움이 있습니다. 또 이제 HR에서의 의사결정 주기와 마케팅 의사결정 주기를 보면 마케팅 측면에서는 특정 고객이 어떤 물건을 잘 사도록 어떤 추천을 한다든지 하는 이런 의사결정 주기가 굉장히 빈번해요. 그리고 잘못된 의사결정이 어떤 코스트가 크지 않아요. 반면에 HR에서 사람을 선발한다든지 스태핑하는 디시전들은 그 의사결정의 주기는 빠르지 않지만 굉장히 중요한 결정이죠. 그리고 이제 우리가 관심을 가는 패턴 측면에서는 마케팅이나 세일즈에서는 20대 수도권에 사는 여자들이 우리 상품을 좋아하면 그 사람들 대상으로 타겟팅을 하면 돼요. Why? 왜 좋아하는지는 중요하지 않아요. 반면에 HR에서는 원인의 인터벤션에서 결과를 개선하기 위해서 그 인과성을 아는 것이 되게 중요합니다. 다음은 People Analytics의 애널리틱을 좀 개념적으로 정의를 해볼 텐데 우리가 이제 통상적으로 스태티스틱이라고 할 때는 과거의 데이터가 충분치 않았던 시절에 작은 데이터에서 어떤 그 가설을 일반화하는데 그 통계적 기법이 쓰였어요. 그래서 중요한 정책 결정을 한다든지 신약의 효과를 증명한다든지 할 때 통계적 기법이 쓰였고 AI 머신러닝 같은 것들은 충분히 많은 데이터를 가지고 아까 말한 그 개인화라든지 추천처럼 빈번한 의사결정들을 자동화하기 위한 기술이라고 보면 돼요. 반면에 이제 애널리틱스는 양의 많고 적음보다는 우리가 궁금한 질문과 적절한 데이터를 발굴해서 기업 내에서 어떤 집단적인 중요한 의사결정을 할 때 데이터 기반 의사결정을 하는 어떤 도구라고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 그래서 그 지금부터는 이 성공적인 그 People Analytic Framework에 대해서 이제 그 사례를 통해 이야기를 할 텐데, 일단 People Analytics는 그 People 데이터의 쓸모를 궁리하는 일이라고 저는 정의를 했어요. 여기서 쓸모라고 하면 구체적인 비즈니스 문제를 푸는 거라고 정의하면 되겠고, 일단 그 데이터가 답할 수 있는 좋은 질문을 디파인하는 것이 중요하겠고, 그리고 그 데이터에서 뻔하지 않고 쓸모 있는 패턴을 발견해서 조직 내에서 분석 결과가 수용되고 활용되도록 하는 것이 전체적인 프로세스이고, 중간에 있는 패턴을 발견하는 일은 지금 기술과 도구가 굉장히 잘해주고 있어요. 이제 사람은 질문을 디파인하는 것, 그리고 분석 결과를 조직 내에서 수용될 수 있는 형태로 가공해서 프리젠팅하는 것, 그런 것들이 이제 사람의 역할이라고 생각합니다. 지금 보는 데이터는 실제 뭐 데이터라고 보시면 될 것 같은데, 일단 그 조직 내에서 이제 리더십 역량 서베이를 했다고 볼게요. 그리고 우리 궁금할 거예요. 좋은 리더 밑에 있는 부하 직원들이 과연 일 잘할까? 그래서 과연 부하의 성과 점수랑 리더십 역량 점수랑 관계가 있을까 하고, 이런 식으로 이제 그 코릴레이션을 그려봤어요. 코릴레이션이라는 것은 숫자와 숫자 간에 어떤 관계가 있는지를 살펴보는 통계 기법이고요. 보시는 것처럼 뭐 통계적 잣대를 들이대지 않더라도 X축에 있는 매니저의 리더십 점수랑 Y축에 있는 부하의 성과 점수 간에 아무런 패턴이 없어요. 그리고 상관계수를 계산했더니 빵이 나왔어요. 제가 이제 꼭지에 데이터에 답이 없는 질문이라고 했는데, 이걸 보고 매니저의 리더십과 부하 직원의 성과 점수가 관계가 없다고 얘기하면 안 돼요. 우리가 로우 데이터, 로우 데이터, 원천 데이터, 원시 데이터 하는데, 사실 데이터에는 원시 데이터, 원천 데이터라는 건 없어요. 데이터가 수집되고 측정되고 가공되는 과정에서 사람이 개입하기 때문에 데이터가 쌓인 맥락을 이해해야 되는데, 통상적인 회사의 경우 그 부하 직원의 성과 점수는 어떻습니까? 좋은 리더 밑에 일하든 그렇지 못한 리더 밑에 일하든 정규 분포를 갖는 그 상대 평가를 갖게 되겠죠. 그렇기 때문에 이 데이터를 보고 두 변수 간의 관계가 없다가 아니라 오히려 이것은 우리 조직 내에서 부하 직원의 성과 점수가 측정되고 있는 어떤 현실의 질서가 드러났다, 이렇게 이해하시면 될 것 같아요. 그럼 이번에 질문을 바꿔서, 그렇다면 매니저의 리더십 점수와 매니저의 성과 점수가 관계 있을까? 이 질문은 좀 타당한 질문인 것 같아요. 그래서 두 변수를 또 이렇게 코릴레이션 해봤어요. 봤더니 두 변수 간의 상관관계가 0.06 정도로 굉장히 낮았어요. 상관관계의 크고 낮음은 어떤 맥락에 따라 달라지겠지만 0.06 정도면 사실은 패턴이 있다고 얘기하기는 좀 조심스러운 것 같아요. 그래서 리더의 실질적인 퍼포먼스 스코어랑 주변 그 360도에서 평가하는 리더십 점수 간에는 유의미한 관계가 없어요 이렇게 얘기할 수도 있겠지만, 곰곰이 생각을 해보면 X축을 보면 특정 점수대 그 관측값들이 쪼르륵 모여 있죠. 그 얘기는 뭐냐면 사실은 성과 점수는 점수가 아니었어요. 사실은 등급을 점수로 포기했던 것이고, 그래서 우리가 어떻게 했냐면 저 3점을 C등급이라고 두고 5점을 S등급이라고 뒀어요. 이렇게 숫자 변수를 범주형 변수로 바꾸면 질문이 어떻게 바뀌냐면 두 개의 숫자 간의 상관관계가 있냐가 아니라 서로 다른 등급 간의 Y값에 유의미한 차이가 있나를 보는 질문으로 바뀌게 돼요. 그렇게 해서 오른쪽 아래에 있는 차트를 봤더니 지금 저렇게 그 색깔로 표시한 것이 95% 신뢰 구간인데, C등급 받은 리더십 점수의 95% 신뢰 구간과 맨 우측에 있는 S등급 받은 사람들의 리더십 점수의 95% 신뢰 구간이 겹치지 않았어요. 보통 서로 다른 두 집단 간에 Y값에 유의미한 차이가 있는가를 확인할 때 사용하는 가장 직관적인 방법이고, 그래서 이제 기본적인 데이터 리터러시, 리더 성과 점수는 숫자가 아니라 범주이다. 그래서 숫자를 범주로 바꿨더니 또 없던 패턴이 나오기도 한다. 그 얘기를 드리고 싶었습니다. 다음으로 중요한 것은 이제 우리가 궁금한 것과 관련성이 높은 데이터를 뽑는 일인데, 그것을 이제 그 머신러닝 하는 쪽 분석하는 사람들은 피처라고 불러요. 예를 들어 이제 우리가 궁금한 것이 그 사과와 오렌지를 이렇게 구분할 수 있는 특성들을 찾는 거라고 해볼게요. 우리한테 주어진 변수는 일단 X1 과일이 얼마나 잘 익었는지, 그리고 X2 씨앗의 개수, 3번 중량, X4 그 과일의 색깔이라고 해볼게요. 좌측 아래에 있는 그 플랫 그림을 보면 X축에는 씨앗의 개수, Y축에는 과일이 얼마나 잘 농익은 정도를 계량한 수치를 놨더니 어떻습니까? 그 사과와 귤이 와글와글 섞여 있어서 구분하기가 어려웠죠. 반면에 우측에 있는 그 플랫을 보면 X축에는 색깔, Y축에는 과일의 중량을 놨어요. 그랬더니 사과는 사과끼리, 귤은 귤, 아오리는 아오리끼리 아주 잘 묶였죠. 그렇다면 우리가 궁금한 것, 사과와 귤을 구분하기 위한 꼭 알아야 되는 변수는 달랑 두 개예요. 색깔 그리고 중량. 이렇게 우리가 궁금한 것과 궁금한 것을 찾아줄 수 있는 변수를 피처라고 하는 것이고, 피처 엔지니어링은 이런 변수를 인위적으로 만드는 일인데 반드시 이것을 그 어떤 기술적으로 할 필요 없이 도메인 지식으로 만들 수 있어요. 예를 들어서 우리가 이제 당뇨병의 위험을 높일 수 있는 어떤 그 신체적인 요인이 뭐가 있을까 궁금하다고 해볼게요. 1번의 차트를 보면 X축에 키가 있어요. 키와 당뇨병은 눈으로 시각적으로 큰 패턴이 보이지 않아요. 반면에 몸무게와 당뇨병 2번을 봤더니 몸무게가 증가할수록 당뇨병의 위험도가 올라가는 것이 보이죠. 근데 곰곰이 생각을 해보면 비만이 어떤 당뇨병의 인디케이터라고 했을 때 키를 고려한 몸무게가 더 비만을 잘 나타내는 프락시 지표일 거라고 생각이 돼요. 그래서 저 코텔레이라는 사람이 BMI라는 지수를 만들었고, BMI는 잘 알고 계신 것처럼 분모에다가 그 키의 제곱, 분자에다가 몸무게를 넣어서 몸무게를 고려한 몸무게가 되는 거예요. 그래서 3번의 차트를 봤더니 BMI가 증가할수록 그 당뇨 위험도가 변이가 굉장히 줄어든 채로 잘 나타났죠. 이런 식으로 그 기존에 있는 변수를 가공해서 내가 궁금한 것을 더 잘 효과적으로 설명하거나 예측하는 변수를 만드는 일을 변수 가공이라고 합니다. HR에서 할 수 있는 변수 가공들은 이러한 것들이 있는데 제가 모두 다 짚어내지는 않겠고, 첫 번째 같은 경우에는 어떤 사람의 재직 기간 동안에 보직 변경 횟수를 나누면 어떤 사람의 회사 내에서의 인터널 모빌리티 지수를 만들 수도 있겠고, 맨 아래에 있는 거 한번 볼까요? 단순히 마지막 진급한 날로부터의 경과일 뿐만 아니라 또래 집단, 나랑 같은 직급에 있는 사람들과의 상대적인 어떤 비율, 절대적, 상대적 그런 숫자를 계산해서 우리가 변수를 새로 만드는 것은 되게 비용이 많이 드는 일이에요. 그러니까 엑셀에 있는 기존의 변수를 더하고 빼고 나누어서 내가 궁금한 것과 관계가 있는 그 변수들을 만들 수 있다고 생각을 합니다. 다음은 이제 뻔하지 않은 결과인데, 이 차트는 X축에는 그 뉴로티시즘, 그러니까 빅5 성격 검사에서 어떤 그 예민함, 어떤 정서적 불안정성을 나타내는 거예요. 그리고 Y축에는 직원들의 연봉을 놨어요. 봤더니 어떻습니까? 정서적으로 불안할수록 연봉을 많이 받는다고 나왔어요. 뭔가 좀 그 우리의 사회 통념과 좀 잘 어긋나는 것 같아요. 그래서 어떻게 했냐면 이번에 이전에 차트에 있던 개별 점들을 그 직급별로 색깔을 다르게 표현했어요. 그랬더니 개별 직급 내에서는 아까 봤던 것과 다른 패턴이 보였죠. 그러니까 뻔하지 않다는 것은 많은 경우 이제 질문이 신선할 수도 있겠지만 동일한 질문에 대해서도 평소에 안 보던 관점, 그러니까 한 차원으로 보던 것을 두 차원으로 보고 그런 식으로 좀 다양한 관점으로 볼 때 또 뻔하지 않는 결과가 나올 수도 있습니다. 끝으로 그 이제 쓸모 있는 결과를 했던 그 과거 사례를 제가 하나 말씀드릴 텐데, 눈에 보시는 것은 이제 실제 데이터고 신입사원의 성과를 예측할 수 있는 인적성 검사의 요인은 어떤 건가가 궁금했어요. 보시는 것처럼 인적성 검사와 퍼포먼스 간의 패턴이 없었어요. 오른쪽에 있는 나라의 불문, 시대의 불문하고 성과 점수랑 관련을 보인다는 인지 능력과도 굉장히 얕은 패턴을 보였어요. 근데 곰곰이 생각을 해보면 기업 내 성과라는 것은 사실은 의견인 것이고, 저 그래프에서 옅은 파란색으로 보이는 것처럼 높은 노력과 역량에도 불구하고 낮은 성과 점수를 받는 사람이 분명히 있을 테고, 아주 짙은 곤색으로 표시된 낮은 노력과 역량에도 불구하고 높은 성과를 받는 사람이 있을 거예요. 그 얘기는 무슨 얘기냐면 성과 점수에는 시그널도 있겠지만 노이즈가 많이 끼어 있다는 얘기예요. 그래서 노이즈를 제거하려면 어떻게 하면 되냐? 극단을 비교하면 되는 거예요. 그러니까 5년 내내 높은 성과 점수를 받았다면 그냥 운의 영향보다는 본인의 역량 때문에 잘한다고 볼 수 있겠죠. 그래서 두 양극단의 집단을 비교하는 방법이 알고리즘적인 방법이 디시전 트리인데, 그림에 보는 것처럼 별이 고성과자, 세모가 저성과자라고 했을 때 끼리끼리 모이도록, 동질적인 집단으로 모이도록 공간을 구획하는 알고리즘이 디시전 트리예요. 그래서 앞에 봤던 그 X축에 이 친구가 대학에서 동아리 경험을 몇 년 했는지, Y축에 인내력 점수가 어떤지 두 가지 변수를 가지고 고성과자들은 저성과자는 저성과끼리 모이도록 공간을 구획하면 이렇게 나와요. 그래서 오른쪽에 있는 것은 공간을 구획한 것을 트리 형태, 스무고개 하듯이 표로 나타낸 것이고, 예를 들어서 좌측 아래에 있는 빨간색 영역을 보면 동아리 경험이 0.8년 이하이고 인내력 점수가 87년 이하인 경우에 12명이 있었는데 12명이 다 저성과자였어요. 그러면 저 규칙이 저성과자를 예측하는 규칙이라고 볼 수 있어요. 그래서 앞에 패턴이 없던 동일한 데이터를 양극단을 비교해 봤어요. 똑같이 이제 디시전 트리 알고리즘을 돌렸더니 어떻게 나왔냐면, 혁신 점수가 높은 경우에 오히려 고성과자 비율이 줄었는데 AND 조건으로 실행력도 높고 거기다가 AND 조건으로 학점까지 높은 경우에 해당 집단에 있는 사람이 예를 들어 100명이었다면 92%가 탑 20 하이 퍼포머였어요. 이렇게 이제 없는 패턴도 항상은 아니지만 어떤 분석적인 기법을 달리함에 따라 문제를 어떻게 디파인 하냐에 따라 패턴이 또 나올 수도 있습니다. 마지막 장표이고요. 그래서 못다한 얘기는 이따 Q&A 때 드리겠고, People Analytics가 실용적인 얘기를 되려면 굳이 의견을 바꾸려고 하지 말고 좀 우리가 통제 가능한, 인터벤션 가능한 패턴을 찾으려고 노력해야 돼요. 그러려다 보면 개인보다는 개인의 환경에 집중해야 돼요. 그러니까 흡연하는 사람을 흡연의 환경을 개선하려고 해야지 그 사람을 이렇게 자꾸 나무란다고 개선되는 일이 아니고, 그리고 측정하기 어려우면 우리가 서베이 같은 걸 통해서 물으면 되는 것이고, 공부하는 방법은 궁금한 것을 그때그때 구글에 찾아보면서 배우시면 될 것 같습니다. 이상입니다.
Okay, thank you for your insightful presentation. It was interesting that the concept of analytics he explains here, which stands for a process to decision intelligence by using relevant data. In terms of decision intelligence, In the real world, in fact, it is often difficult to implement due to the complexity and habitual nature of the decision-making process. However, through this presentation, we were able to look at how to overcome these obstacles with specific examples. Our next guest is Dr. Heather Whiteman, a Future Workplace Fellow. She is an outstanding expert in people analytics and the future of work. She not only participates as a speaker at numerous HR conferences, but also teaches people analytics at UC Berkeley. Before that, she was leading the people analytics division at GE, General Electric. She's now going to speak on the topic of big data and the future of human resources management. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Whiteman.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am excited to be here and a part of this forum with you. I wish that I was there with you in person, but I'm happy that we can still meet virtually through this presentation. Thank you for that introduction. As was shared, my name is Heather Whiteman, and I love working with people data. I have spent the last 15 years applying people analytics and data-driven insights in HR functions, leading talent management, development, in different areas of learning and development, HR technology, and strategic planning. And I find a lot of joy in sharing what I've found, my passion, and helping others along that route too. So today I am very excited to share with you some thoughts around how I see big data shaping the future of human resource management. And in order to do that, I need to start with a little bit of the context around our world and how much it is changing. We are seeing so many changes in the way that people are living and working longer. People are having more careers. They're moving closer to big cities and more recently, sometimes further away from big cities. We're seeing the creation of new types of jobs. We're seeing the impact of automation and additional ways of working, changing how work is done, but also making things like uniquely human skills even more valuable. We're finding that now we are working from anytime, anywhere. We're all on different time zones, even as we speak right now. We're finding different ways of putting work together, such as the gig economy, working in teams, coming together and living in pre, during, and post COVID situations like Professor Contractor was talking about. And just a shift in the way that we need to think about the skills and the education and the learning that it takes to get there. So with all of these things going on, human resources has no choice but to transform. We must transform human resources with the transforming world. And there's really three big things that will make that transformation happen. Those are technology, data and analytics, and employee expectations. I'm going to go into each one of these three, but before I do, I actually want to start with a little story, and I want to introduce you to my friend. This is my friend Emma. Now, Emma's not a real person. This is just a photo that was free on the internet, but let's say that Emma was a recent university graduate. She just graduated with her computer science degree, and she's excited to go out into the world and get her first job. But she doesn't know how to go about that. She's spent years in school, but she doesn't know how her skills and her areas of expertise and understanding might fit into potential jobs. So she goes on the internet and she enters all of her skills into some algorithms that tell her exactly which jobs to apply for. In fact, they even apply for her. All she does is fill out a bunch of questionnaires and take a couple assessments. She even records an interview, not an interview with a person, just a video of herself responding to interview questions. that gets uploaded, and algorithms can analyze it and assess her personality, her skills, and sends that along to a company. That company can then decide, without even having met Emma, whether or not they might want to hire her. And rather than having Emma, fly and meet the team or do interviews, maybe they even just say, hey, why don't you decide if you like us? And they give her a preview of the job by sending her a virtual reality headset. She puts on this little cardboard thing onto her smartphone, and she can look around at the company that she's going to go work for and get a sense for who she'll be working with, the products that her software code goes on. And with all of this together, her and the company might decide that they want to work together, even if Emma hasn't yet talked to a single human. This can all just be done through algorithms and technology. When Emma does start her work, she can be given all these sets of tools that track her productivity and her work behaviors. Her computer will have all sorts of software on it that tracks how much she works, what quantity of output she has, who she works with. It'll even possibly say what type of connector relationship she has, just like we saw in one of the previous presentations. And it can start to understand, who does she talk with? Who does she interact with? How does she spend her time? All of that data can feed into a learning system that tells Emma exactly what things she needs to improve. It can go through all that data and say, wow, you've had a couple too many errors in this line of code. Maybe you should take this training. Or you really haven't been having as positive of communications with your colleagues as it would be advised. Why don't you take some communication training? And it can offer her tailored learning opportunities based on her unique needs for the role. And all of this together can even say how engaged she is. We can start to get a pretty good picture of who Emma is, who she spends her time with, who she works with, what kind of productivity, what kind of engagement she has on developing her own career and driving it forward. And maybe it even tells us things like, maybe Emma has had a slump, a loss in productivity. She's not engaging with people at work as much. She's not producing as much work. She's not trying to learn and develop and grow. So maybe this isn't the right role for her. Maybe we need to think about a new career option. And we could let algorithms say, what's the next best job for Emma? If it's not software engineer, maybe she's well suited for another area. And really the process can start over from that. Emma could end up right back at that apply stage, looking into her next career. Now, typically this is the point where I would stop and ask you how Emma's story makes you feel. So just think for a minute. Do you want to be Emma? Do you want all of your experiences to be running through individual pieces of data and technology, maybe with no humans involved? How does it make you feel? Now, some of you might be excited by the possibilities, but I often hear as well that this can be potentially problematic in how you can think about the dehumanization that data might sometimes bring. So we in the HR function and focus area do need to understand that we are the stewards of people analytics in HR. And as I talk about these trends and I talk about the transformation of human resources, keep Emma in mind. Picture a person and picture how the things that you think about are affecting them. So getting back into those things, the transformation of human resources is really going to be revolving around three main topics: technology, data and analytics, and employee expectations. Now, technology, we already see today. This is what you saw in the story of Emma. You saw that there were all sorts of algorithms and data science and workflow diagnostics and network analyses, employee sentiment. There are so many things that seem like the future, but are actually today because technology has now made them possible. And not only do we have technology that can create more data and more outcomes and outputs, we have the data from that technology. So not just data to drive analytics and insights, but technology plus analytics allows us to analyze more, do more, and have bigger outcomes than we've really been able to do in HR in the past. And not only can we do more, we can do it faster, like instantly faster. We now have the ability to do real-time analytics. You can now have things like learning recommendations pop up the moment you make a mistake. You know, why wait for a one-year performance review to figure out how to develop? You now have the ability to use analytics and technology to help with the ways we think about talent management. And they're getting easier to use. It used to be so hard. You know, I really appreciated Mr. Yang's presentation where he was showing correlation and the lines and the color. Those are all fantastic applications of statistics and analytics. And now we're getting technology platforms that allow us to do those more easily. So that now, even if you don't have a background in statistics, you might be able to use some of the technology platforms to help you do that work more easily. And then finally, something that I care about a lot, and I'm sure Emma would care about if she was a real person, is data privacy and accessibility. With all of this data, with all of this technology, we do need to be thinking about how we keep data private and how we make sure that it's accessible in the right ways for the right people and in the right connection. So this is one of my favorite quotes to that comment, which is, just because you can measure everything doesn't mean you always should. And so I do like to leave people with some thoughts when they think about people analytics. These are my own personal principles that I share with others. I always aim for, let's use people data for good. Don't be creepy. If you're working on something and it seems weird, we should probably be talking about whether or not it's appropriate to do. And that's because people data is private data, and we need to treat it that way and have a conscientious approach to it. And we need that approach because people data is not like other data. It's not like some physics or materials. It's not dollars or other currency. It is about people, and we need to think about it that way. Funny enough, about 6 hours ago, I actually had an article published on 7 ways that HR can build a fair data-informed culture. So if you're curious on any steps to do that, again, this article just published today, so feel free if you want to check that out. But it is our role as HR practitioners to help make sure that we're using these right. And then finally, it's because we are the stewards of the employee experience, and the employees have expectations of us. Employees now have expectations in the workplace that match their expectations in the consumer world. I'm wearing a smartwatch. I love it. I love that it tells me what's going on, how I'm doing on things. And our employees are starting to say, you have all this data on me. Why aren't you using it to help me know how I'm doing? Why aren't you using it to help me understand my career or be more effective or balance my life and my work? And so we are starting to see that employee expectations, they're asking for more personalization. They're asking for more interconnectivity. They're looking for that work-life integration. And we can all laugh now that even while I was talking to you, I had someone ring my doorbell and my dog started barking in the background, because now we have true work-life integration in our lives, and we need to know that for our employees, and we need to think about that when we set up our data and our analytics. So I will just leave you with a couple things if you would like to do things to prepare. For those of you who aren't data and analytics in your background, you can still gather understanding around it and use it with your uniquely human skills to bring about more outcomes, you can make sure that you're continuously growing skills that will allow you to leverage them and bring it into, and you can be a steward for powerful, positive use of data and technology in your organization. And I hope that you're able to do so, and feel free to connect with me if at any point you want to talk about how you can do that more, because I love sharing and bringing people into the power of using data and using people analytics to drive change. So with that, Mr. Lee, thank you very much for letting me have a moment.
Thank you, Dr. Whiteman. You left us various insights with the story of Emma. Actually, she's not a real person, though. In addition to this, we were able to explore possible workplace trends in the future. I just want to say I apologize that there was a little bit delay on YouTube just before Dr. Whiteman's speech due to a technical issue on YouTube. And I think now it works well. The last speaker in this session is Eun Jin-gi, the HR strategy partner at Reeboks Consulting. He has had an outstanding career to date, from studying HR and organizational development at the University of Southern California to working at leading companies such as Samsung Hwajae and JobPlanet. He is currently consulting businesses in size from startup to multinational corporation, regarding all aspects of HR at Reeboks Consulting. Today, he is going to present on the topic of people analytics in Korea, overcoming roadblocks. Won't you please give a warm welcome to our last speaker?
Thank you. Hello, I'm Jin-ki Eun from Reeboks Consulting, and it's a great honor to be here today. And let me just jump right into my presentation. So we see two numbers here, 88% and 12.5%. What does these two numbers mean? Obviously, there's a big gap between them. When Thomson's asked around 380 HR professionals around the world if they have people analytics capabilities within their organization, 88% said yes. However, when People Plus and Wanted, they did a survey of around 180 HR professionals in Korea if they use people analytics, only 12.5 said yes. Although the high increase in the interest in people analytics and big data and data-driven HR in Korea, why such a large gap? Why isn't Korean HR utilizing people analytics as much? To answer this, let me start off with my experience as a consultant regarding people analytics. A Korean conglomerate in the financial sector called us and asked them to support us. And their objective was to basically make HR decisions based on data. More specifically, they wanted us to find traits of successful employees for each function and build a model and a tool to predict high potential employees. With this tool and model, they eventually wanted to utilize it to make personnel movement decisions as well as hiring decisions. This was what we proposed. Since the project seemed too broad for us, because they had more than 40, 50 different functions, right? So we narrowed them down to only one function, the key function that we thought was sales branch managers. And the bulk of the workforce was in that field as well. We plan to conduct surveys, FGIs, to identify what we called key success traits, collect, analyze the data, build a prototype model, and test the model, of course. And with that model, we wanted to do a long-term study to improve it upon time. this was what we had. We had enough budget. We had great HR professionals and experts. We had a big data team comprised of PhDs from world-renowned schools and data scientists and engineers. And also, we had the motivation to succeed as well. And I felt pretty confident that we could make something of it and turn this company really into and initiate the first step into turning this organization into data-driven HR. However, the project didn't really materialize and got dropped before it even got started. I think looking back, these are the 4 things that we lacked that prevented us from the success. As you might assume, this was a very complicated project where we needed to survey, interview a lot of people, identify the key success traits, of course, and build a prototype model as well as conduct a long-term test to create a predictive model and a tool. However, we were only given 6 months to deliver a working tool. Also, as I mentioned before, we had a lot of data, but it was all dispersed throughout different departments and teams, and how and where it was stored and kept was all different as well. In addition, reluctance to share these data amongst all the teams and departments, and of course with outside consultants such as myself, was a big problem as well. Moreover, ownership of the project was with HR. So the big data team and the sales team didn't really have the motivation to dedicate their time and effort to the project. HR didn't really share the big picture or involve them in creating the objective of the project. And in my honest opinion, I felt that HR only wanted to reap all the success for themselves. Fear of failure and the lack of trust from the employees were also factors we lacked that negatively influenced the outcome as well. This is not only confined to this one case or company. I see similar challenges in adopting people analytics in a lot of different organizations in Korea. And you could see here, first, wanting results too fast. Also, a lot of you might have experienced, there are frequent CEO or leadership changes within especially Korean conglomerates. And with this change, a lot of the projects that the leadership led gets dropped or stopped to make room for their own projects, right? So this continuous, testing and error gets kind of stopped right in the middle. Second, in Korea, they have a saying that HR is on the company's side. So we call it 인사는 사측, right? So instead of the employee side, I had a difficult time understanding this because I thought and still think the company is made up of individual employees and there is no need to divide sides between the company and its people. Third, as I mentioned before, data is dispersed and is not shared. So it's difficult to have an integrated approach in utilizing the data, the valuable data we already have. Fourth, there is fear of people analytics in Korea, I feel. And since it's linked with big words such as data mining, machine learning, and AI, right? So even before they start, they're afraid to initiate people analytics as a whole within the organization. And lastly, even HR doesn't really trust the data they have. For example, in Korea, there will be high correlation between performance evaluation, the ratings, and the promotion periods. Since bosses give out good evaluations to employees who need good evaluations, a certain limit of evaluations to be promoted, right? So we see this happening a lot of times, especially within big organizations. Then how can we overcome these challenges? First, it might be difficult, but having leadership understand people analytics is a journey, not a short sprint, is very important. I always emphasize data is like compound interest. The faster and the sooner we start gathering the data, we could do much powerful things with it. Secondly, we all know garbage in and garbage out. The quality of data depends on the trust level of the employees. They need to trust HR that the reason for collecting data is not to harm them, but to support them, so they could provide honest responses. Third, as of now, there aren't a lot of organizations that have people analytics departments or teams totally dedicated only on people analytics. Therefore, we need to support, HR needs support from different people, different teams, and different functions. So rather than having HR, the department as a team, right, lead the project by having complete ownership themselves, I suggest you create cross-functional teams and share successes and build objectives together. Fourth, don't think of people analytics as rocket science. We see Googles and IBMs of the world and the level of people analytics they already provide, right? So before even starting, we see this, big data, real-time analysis, and all the graphics. And even before we start, we tend to just think, maybe next time, maybe it's not my turn, right? With this simple Excel spreadsheet and your already data at hand, you can start experimenting and people analytics. And starting this conversation, I think, is very important. And lastly, be open to using external service providers, such as Dr. Whitman mentioned, or Headcount, right? So it's hard to create all these functions within yourselves in a short amount of time. You might lack the resources, but be open to utilizing these services. So I'm not going to go over all these different services, but from experience, I know that a lot of Korean conglomerates tend to shy away from using outside services, especially in the HR area, and want to create these people analytics capabilities in-house. However, there are already great people analytics tools you could use right away, and some of these services are even in Korean. You could utilize it right away. These service providers are cooperating and aligning and integrating data sets and services to make it much more powerful. I see Korean startups starting to create similar services and really hope that they help the proliferation of people analytics in Korea. Although I touched upon the challenges and the roadblocks Korean HR is facing in implementing people analytics, but there are some great cases starting to emerge and being shared within the community. This Gungmin Bank case, where they used AI to place employees to different branches, is one case that recently got a lot of media exposure. Also, Kakao's Pi Lab is another company that is sharing their best practices in people analytics, which I think is great, and we need much more in Korea. They are truly pushing people analytics to another level in Korea. When I talk to HR professionals regarding people analytics, they point out that the lack of data or lack of the people or expertise or collaboration is some of the things that's stopping them to fully utilizing people analytics. But I personally think the most important thing is the shift in the mindset. Rather than viewing our employees as something to monitor or manage, we need to shift our mindset to approach them as our internal customers and use people analytics to provide better employee experience. I want to conclude with saying that before data comes people. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. He detailed the difficulties that Korean corporations face in using HR or people analytics and how to tackle them. As a matter of fact, if you delve deeper into this issue, I think it can be interpreted to raise two essential questions. First, are we really able to quantify people's information, such as individuals' personalities, skills, capabilities, or potential? Second, does the decision maker really make rational and objective decisions? Well, there is no right or wrong answer to these questions. However, I just hope each of you think about this later on. And now we are going to have a Q&A session with the audience. So several questions came up during the presentation. From these, I'm going to ask the panelists mainly the questions with the greatest number of likes from our audience. I can see the first question. This question is for all of you. So the question is, okay, this one. So have you ever experienced then that intuition of HR practitioner was different to the result of data analysis? And how did you solve this problem? In Korean, HR 담당자의 직관과 데이터 분석의 결과가 차이가 있던 경험에 대한 질문입니다. Who would like to respond first to this question? Sydney, would you please?
Can I
First?
say
Yes,
brief?
please.
Okay. 아까 제가 이제 그 강의 슬라이드에 이제 잠깐 한 꼭지로 언급하고 갔는데 마지막에 제가 드리고 싶었던 이야기가 진짜 의견을 바꾸는 것 정말 어려운 것 같아요. 특히 이제 데이터로 아무리 에비던스 베이스 숫자가 나오더라도 그 의견을 바꾸기가 어려운데 그래서 이제 데이터 분석 주제를 수립할 때 이제 내 목표가 사실은 그 우리 보스의 의견을 바꾸는 게 아니라 풀려고 하는 문제에 대한 어떤 실용적인 해결책을 가지고 하는 것이라, 그러니까 단순히 뭐 우리 그 항상 데이터 분석을 하면 뻔한 패턴이 나와요. 예를 들면 좋은 리더가 있으면 그 팀의 프로덕티비티가 좋다. 근데 이제 이것은 테이크어웨이, 그러니까 액셔너블한 인사이트가 없잖아요. 그래서 뻔한 패턴이더라도 우리가 이제 우리 직원들한테 강조하는 리더십 덕목이 한 20가지가 되는데 아주 구체적인 리더십 덕목을 이렇게 개선하면 팀 프로덕티비티가 구체적으로 얼마나 개선된다. 그러니까 그 반박할 수 없는 수치, 그리고 내가 이제 인터벤셔너블한 그런 액션 아이템을 갖고 이야기를 해서 지표를 개선할 생각을 해야지 굳이 상사의 의견과 다투는 일은 정말 부질없는 일이라고 생각합니다.
답변 감사합니다.
네네. 저도 그냥 사례 한 개를 공유 드리자면 예전에 뭐 유명했던 구글에서 했던 실험이 있었는데 구글 내부에서 가지고 있는 이런 myth라고 하잖아요. 소문 이런 것들에 대해서 People Analytics 팀에서 그런 것들을 이제 실질적으로 데이터로 분석을 해서 네, 그런 것들이 사실이 아니다라고 이제 많이 알려진 케이스들이 있어요. 그래서 실질적으로 제가 뭐 이제 그 기업명은 밝히기는 힘들겠지만 한국에서도 한 대기업에서 그런 비슷한 것들을 했어요. 그래서 예를 들자면 본사에 근무하면은 더 빨리 승진을 한다, 더 좋은 평가를 받는다. 이런 것들에 대해서 많은 그쪽의 직원들이 인사한테 던졌었고 질문들을. 근데 실질적으로 데이터 분석하는 건 너무 쉽거든요. 근데 실제로 해보니까 전혀 상관이 없었어요. 심지어 더 작은 더 본사에서 멀리 떨어진 작은 조직에서 오히려 그런 correlation, 그런 연관관계가 밝혀졌어요. 그래서 네, 통상 직원들이 가지고 있던 불만들이잖아요. 본사만 챙겨준다. 이런 게 아니라는 것을 데이터를 통해서 충분히 해소했던 그런 사례가 있었습니다. 네.
Thank you. Heather or Noshir, would you like to add anything to their comments?
I would. Hi, everyone. I think that is a great question. And when I talk about the intuition of HR, I like to think of it as being necessary to go with data. Data all by itself can sometimes not tell us enough, or it might mislead us, or it could even only show us part of the picture. We need the HR manager and the person who understands what's happening to be able to translate that information into something that we can do with it. And that may not always be an analyst. I really appreciated Mr. Jinky talking about how you don't have to be very advanced. And in fact, some of the best things that you can do is use your intuition plus data. The data will make your intuition better, and your intuition will make the data better. And I've seen it work really well.
Okay, thank you. How about Noshir? Do you have any other opinions on that?
Sure. Yeah. I think that sometimes I think the example that Dr. Whiteman gave is good one because it says that sometimes the intuition can reinforce what the data says and vice versa. There are also some instances where, in fact, the intuition might be challenged by the data insight. I did some work a few years ago on a consulting project with a company that you might have heard of, a small company called Procter & Gamble. And Procter & Gamble were doing, there were two insights from there, which I'm going to share with you very quickly. The first was, I was doing some network analysis with them and in a particular group of community of practice at P&G. And I went to present the results at World Headquarters in Cincinnati. And there was lots of food and snacks around. And I said, did you do this for me? And they said, no, we have a retirement party. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm glad that I was able to join your retirement party for one of your colleagues. And what I did was I showed them some results that day on the screen in terms of a particular person in that organization who was pivotal in terms of their informal social networks in bringing together a lot of groups of people that would not be connected if this person was not there. Guess what? It was that person's retirement party. And so they immediately, in their wisdom, brought that person back in, kept that person for 2 years, and then worked with me to use the same network analytic tools to come up with new a succession plan for who should be a good person who could succeed this person in that informal role. And the second very quick example was they did an internal kind of Twitter social media experiment where they asked people to talk about what the future of P&G would be if there was no intellectual property rights, IPR. And they brought me in not to look at the content of what was said, but they brought me in to look at the metadata, the digital exhaust. And I was able to show them that there was one person who, whenever she started a trail, was being traced, had a lot of other discussion was coming as a result of that, while other people would say something and nothing came of it. And this person, it turns out, was actually an intern from college. And they immediately realized that they would not have valued this person, but this is the person who they ended up hiring because they realized this person was somebody who was generating good ideas and discussion, etc., and engagement from a large number of people. So in some cases, HR intuition can be modified, if you may, by looking at the data that comes out of it.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the next question. I think these two questions is similar. That came to here. Okay. In Korean, people analytics를 활용하기 위해 먼저 분석을 위한 충분한 데이터가 있어야 하는 걸로 아는데 직원 수가 적고 연차가 얼마 되지 않은 회사에서는 어떻게 활용을 시작하면 좋을까요? 비슷한 질문이 하나 더 있어서 같이 읽어드리겠습니다. 데이터라는 것이 일정 규모 이상이 축적이 돼야 분석과 예측이 가능한데 스타트업의 경우 어떻게 이를 활용할 수 있을까요? 이 질문은 전체에 대해서 해주셨지만 은진기 상무님께서 먼저 대답해 주시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
네, 저는 이제 발표 때도 말씀드린 것처럼 그 데이터가 선행이 돼야 되나? 데이터 축적이 물론 굉장히 중요하지만 사실상 사람들을 구성원들을 어떻게 바라보고 회사가 이분들을 위해서 어떻게 employee experience 경험을 더 좋게 하기 위해서 무엇을 해줄 수 있는가라는 진정성 있는 고민만 있으면 충분히 이런 데이터 활용이 가능하다고 생각을 해요. 그리고 꼭 많은 데이터가 축적이 지금부터 돼 있던 것을 이용을 할 필요는 없다고 생각을 하고요. 예를 들어 뭐 최근 사례는 사람들이 언제 회의를 해야지 더 생산성이 높아지지 이런 것들에 대해서도 그냥 간단하게 회의실에 뭐 이런 뭐 특별한 테크놀로지 없이 그냥 뭐 빨간색이 뭐 기본 그 생산적이지 않았던 것 뭐 이런 것들을 시간대별로 이제 넣으면서 그것만 보더라도 몇 시부터 몇 시까지 하면은 우리 회사 구성원들이 더 생산적으로 회의를 하고 더 만족스러운 회의를 하는구나 이렇게 충분히 시작할 수 있거든요. 그리고 지금부터 예를 들자면 채용에 있어서 언보딩 할 때 언보딩 프로세스, 채용 프로세스, 흔히들 뭐 candidate experience라고 하잖아요. 후보자 경험이라고 하는데 각각을 좀 나눠서 리크루터가 처음에 연락을 왔을 때는 어땠어요? 그런 거에 대해서 서베이를 하고 그리고 이런 단계마다 쪼개서 쭉 받은 다음에 그러면 어느 영역에서 우리가 뭐 오퍼레터 보내는 단계가 좀 늦었구나. 이런 부분에서 우리는 더 개선을 해야 되겠네라고 충분히 그 데이터를 활용할 수 있거든요. 그래서 우리가 흔히 말하는 뭐 빅데이터, AI라고 생각을 하면서 수만 개 적어도 뭐 수천 개의 데이터를 활용해야 된다고 생각을 하는데 저는 뭐 이제 그런 큰 규모의 데이터가 꼭 있어야지 people analytics를 시작을 할 수 있다고 생각하지는 않습니다.
감사합니다. Heather and on the share, would you like to add anything to Jingi's comment?
Yeah, I'll add a little, which is, I have a lot of people who ask about that. They think that my company's too small, or we're too new, or I don't have enough data, or I don't have the right tools. And there's a lot of power in small data, meaning if it's the size of your company, there's still so much that you can find. For example, I have found that companies do a lot of powerful findings when they look at things like the skills and capabilities. Even when you're a small organization, you have so much data when you think about all of the different skills and abilities that each individual employee brings to the organization. And if you can analyze which ones you have strengths in, which ones you have gaps in, you can have a good data-based understanding of where you have skills, where you need more. And then you can go look at external data, which there is a lot of external data, and it'll help you understand where do the skills exist that we don't have today that we need to go get. And that can start to inform your recruiting strategy, that will inform maybe your learning or your development. It might even inform how you decide to put teams or networks together, because you want to make sure that you get a good mix of skills on each team. So even if you think you don't have a lot of people, you might have a lot of data, because each person has a lot of data about them. And that's usually what I recommend for smaller or just starting out organizations.
Okay, thank you. How about Nashia?
If I can add to that, I would say that part of the reason why I agree with my two colleagues who came before me is that big data doesn't necessarily mean a lot of people, or it doesn't necessarily mean a lot of time. So if it's a young organization with a small number of employees, for example, it can still generate, and in my examples that I gave, will generate big data, because the big part of the data comes because of the fact that we now have data collected at every second. We are getting such digital trace data with such high resolution that you are swimming in data, even if you collect data for a few weeks. So there's no excuse to say you can't use big data. The second part of it is that it's not just the big data that comes from digital traces, et cetera, but more important than big data in my research and my consulting has been broad data. And what do I mean by the difference between big data and broad data? Broad data means big data is a lot of the same type of data, like digital trace from WebEx interactions. But broad data is when you start combining different types of data and collating it together. So taking digital trace data, combining it with HR data, combining it with LinkedIn data. I did a consulting project with a very big pharmaceutical company here in Chicago, where we were trying to understand where the current employees at this organization, where they worked before, and where they ended up getting recruited to after they worked at this particular organization. And that was the modeling that we were able to do by going to LinkedIn was incredible in terms of finding ways in which we could understand recruitment strategies as well as retention strategies based upon where the competitive landscape was. For example, they were concerned that they were losing people who wanted to go to the West Coast to be with people like Dr. Whiteman. In fact, what they found was that a lot of the people they were losing were actually going across the street to work. So those are different mechanisms and understandings that they were getting by looking at broad data, not just big data.
Thank you for your answer. I think it's the last question for this session, which is, this question is to Yang Seung-jun. 인사에서 접목할 유용한 빅데이터 항목의 예시가 있다면 경험을 바탕으로 소개 부탁드립니다.
네, 그 앞에 질문하고도 좀 연결이 되는데, 아까 저는 그 강연에서는 이제 렐러번트 데이터의 질문과의 적절성이 중요하다고 말씀드렸어요. 그래서 사실은 행동 데이터라는 것은 많은 경우에 이제 맹목적으로 쌓인 것이라 어떤 패턴 찾으려면 절대적인 양이 담보돼야 되는 것이 맞아요. 근데 우리가 뭐 인식 데이터 같은 것들은 사실은 서베이를 잘만 디자인하면 그 양이 중요한 것이 아니거든요. 그래서 사실은 뭐 people 데이터는 기본적으로 이제 스몰 데이터인데, 제가 이제 올해 주로 했던 분야는 그 교육 쪽이었어요. 그러니까 사람들이 이제 그 온라인 교육들을 많이 하다 보니 그 온라인 교육 쪽에서 이제 사람들이 남긴 어떤 그 아까 얘기했던 디지털 이그조스트 가지고 적절한 교육을 추천하는 그런 일들을 많이 했었는데, HR 도메인에서 국내 환경에서 외부 데이터를 가져다 쓰는 거 사실은 아직은 제한적이고 비즈니스 임팩트 가져올 만한 외부 데이터 많지 않습니다. 그리고 HR 데이터 말고 예를 들면 그 HR 이외의 사내 데이터, 매출 데이터라든지 아니면 뭐 그 어떤 고객 그 콜센터가 있다면 그쪽에 그런 데이터들, 그러니까 HR 이외의 사내 데이터를 가져오는 것도 도메인에 따라서 HR 데이터랑 연결할 수 있는 경우 있지만 대부분의 경우에는 사실은 또 이제 그 연결할 고리가 없어요. 그래서 사실은 다시 놓고 보면 HR 입장에서는 가지고 있는 데이터는 기존에 있는 인사 마스터 데이터에 우리가 서베이를 통해 채워 넣을 수 있는 데이터, 그리고 HR 시스템에 남기는 행동 데이터인데, 제가 올해도 그렇고 앞으로도 좀 피플 애널리틱의 가능성이 보이는 것은 오히려 HRD 쪽이었어요. 기존까지 이제 피플 애널리틱의 테마가 HRM 쪽으로 움직였다면, 그 사람들이 그 온라인을 통해서 이제 교육하는 일들이 활발해질 텐데, 그 데이터를 좀 들여다보면, 그러니까 어떤 그 사람의 어떤 플로우상 또는 어떤 커리어상에서의 적절한 코스를 추천하고 그런 어떤 교육의 인터벤션하는 부분을 데이터적으로 활용하는 것이 가능하고 좀 의미 있다고 보여집니다. 예, 이상입니다.
감사합니다. I think it's the time to wrap up this session. Before bringing our conversation to a close today, I have a short message for Korean organizations and HR practitioners. Let me deliver this part in Korean, relating to the Korean cultural context in a couple of minutes. 세션을 마칠 시간입니다. 마치기 전에 잠시 그 한국의 HR 관계자분들께 한 말씀 드리고 마치려 합니다. 맥락의 이해를 위해서 한국말로 하겠습니다. 아시다시피 코비드-19은 지금 HR을 포함해서 비즈니스 전 영역에 큰 영향을 미치고 있습니다. 하지만 부정적인 측면만 있는 건 아닌데요. 어떤 기술의 발달에 따라서 코비드-19이 HR 측면에서는 기술의 혁신을 3에서 5년 정도 앞당겼다는 이런 전문가들의 의견들도 있습니다. 재택근무 증가, 원격 화상회의, 지금과 같이 또 어떤 장소의 제약을 무너뜨리는 온라인 채용 프로세스들도 그렇다고 생각을 합니다. 흥미로운 건 직원과의 커뮤니케이션 측면에서 직원들의 보이스를 빠르게 듣고 이를 빠르게 분석하고 또 이를 통해서 HR이 빠르게 대처하는 이런 시스템을 구축한 조직들에서는 올해 상반기에 인플로이 인게이지먼트, 그러니까 조직 몰입도가 오히려 상승했다고 합니다. 이 연구를 진행한 덴마크 기업인 피콘에 의하면 2020년도 1월과 그리고 6월에 인플로이 인게이지먼트 수치를 비교했더니 약 2%에서 4% 정도 상승했다고 합니다. 직원 몰입도 1%만 올라도 우리 비즈니스 성과, 또 핵심 인재 유지율, 외부에서 바라보는 조직에 대한 평판, 이런 다양한 측면들의 긍정적인 영향을 미친다는 건 이미 많은 연구로 밝혀져 있습니다. 결국 이런 기업들은 어떤 지금의 불확실성 시대에서 기술을 활용해서 좀 더 HR 측면에서 능동적으로 적극적으로 대처했다고 볼 수 있는데요. 글로벌 시장에는 여기 계신 하트카운트와 그리고 리박스 컨설팅을 포함해서 HR의 각 기능별로 특화된 기업들이 많이 있습니다. 저는 이들과 기술적 파트너십을 맺는 것도 아주 좋은 전략이라고 생각을 합니다. 또한 HR 애널리틱스를 연구하는 학계나 대학 연구팀과 협력하는 산학 협력도 해외에선 상대적으로 조금 더 활발하게 연구되는 것 같습니다. 반면 제 개인적인 생각이기 때문에 일반화할 수는 없지만 우리나라 HR은 조금 배타적이고 보수적인 측면이 약간은 좀 두텁지 않나 이렇게 생각을 해봅니다. 앞으로 우리가 글로벌 시장에서 데이터 기반의 HR, 또 AI 기반의 HR로 거듭나려면 좀 더 오픈 마인드를 가지고 나가야 하지 않을까 생각해 봅니다. That is all for today, the first session of Track B. I hope to see you all participating in the following sessions, and I also appreciate all the speakers and participants for your sharing your knowledge and experience. Thank you so much again, and stay safe and warm. Thank you.
네, 여러분 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 그리고 좌장으로 함께해 주신 연구원님께도 여러분 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 고맙습니다. 네, 이렇게 첫 번째 세션 또 문을 열어주셨는데요. 인사 관리는 기업을 운영하고 또 지속하는 데 굉장히 중요한 부분이죠. 빅데이터 시대를 만나면서 인사 관리를 어떻게 하면 효과적으로 운영할 수 있을지 아마 고민이 계속되고 있으실 것 같은데요. 각 기업에서 활용할 수 있는 소중한 의견들도 제언으로 마무리해 주셨습니다. 고맙습니다. 자, 현재 시간이 10시 34분 지나가고 있고요. 저희는 다음 세션 10시 40분부터 이어서 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 두 번째 세션은 10시 40분에 시작하겠습니다. 잠시 후에 인사드리겠습니다.